She thought she was just another foreign student chasing her K-drama fantasy. Until one rainy afternoon, a forgotten umbrella and a single lingering look changed everything. Ella never imagined that the cold, impossibly handsome Korean lecturer standing before her would become her entire world. But love isn't a K-drama script. There were whispers, jealous eyes, tears, and choices that would tear them apart or bind them forever. This is the story of how Ella, an African girl with nothing but hope, made even Seoul's cherry blossoms bloom just for her. Ella had always believed that dreams could travel across oceans. Back in Lagos, Nigeria, she spent countless afternoons sprawled on her bed, eyes glued to her phone, completely lost in K-dramas. The cherry blossoms drifting through city streets, the shy confessions under umbrellas, the gentle way Korean men held their lovers' hands. It all felt like a secret world that called to her heart. But Ella wasn't just a girl with big fantasies. Back home, she was the bright star of her school, the kind who always raised her hand first, who won local quiz bowls and traveled for national competitions. Teachers would beam when she entered the room. Classmates often turned to her when they were lost. Her brilliance wasn't just in books. It was in her unshakable curiosity, her eagerness to understand everything around her. So when she fell in love with Korean dramas and culture, it wasn't a shallow obsession. It was the same sharp mind that once devoured literature and physics, now poring over Hangul, learning simple recipes, practicing phrases late at night under her breath. Her friends teased her endlessly. "You're obsessed, Ella. Why do you always watch these shows? You really think your life will turn into a Korean drama one day?" She would smile softly and whisper to herself, "Maybe it will." After high school, Ella did something no one expected. She applied to universities in Seoul. Her parents were concerned. Korea was so far away, so unfamiliar. But they had seen her love for the culture grow year after year. They saw the spark in her eyes whenever she learned a new Korean phrase or tried cooking kimchi stew in their small kitchen. So finally, with hopeful hearts, they agreed to support her dream. Ella poured herself into studying, preparing for language exams and entrance tests. Every night she prayed that her wish would come true. When the acceptance letter finally arrived from Seoul National University, she held it against her chest, tears streaming down her face. This was real. She was going to Korea. Seoul was everything she had imagined and so much more. The city seemed alive, with bright neon lights, cozy cafes on every corner, and hidden gardens that felt like something out of a fairy tale. Ella would stand on the bustling sidewalks, close her eyes, and breathe it all in. I made it here. I'm really living my dream. But it wasn't always easy. Some people stared at her skin, some classmates whispered behind her back, and the language she loved sometimes tangled painfully on her tongue. Nights in her small dorm room could feel terribly lonely. But Ella kept reminding herself, this was her dream, and she wouldn't let anything shatter it. Then came Professor Min Jae. The first time he walked into the lecture hall, it felt as if the entire world paused. He was young, startlingly young for a lecturer, with warm brown hair that brushed his forehead and deep, serious eyes that looked like they held 1,000 quiet thoughts. Even the way he adjusted his glasses seemed elegant. The girls around Ella practically sighed, and even some boys sat up straighter. Min Jae was already somewhat of a legend. Brilliant, from an influential family, and strikingly handsome. He was known to be strict, quick to correct mistakes, and yet there was something gentle hidden beneath his cool exterior. Ella tried to blend in, to stay unnoticed. But somehow his gaze often found her. When she asked questions, he listened just a little more intently. When she smiled nervously, sometimes, just sometimes, his own lips curved ever so slightly. One afternoon, after class had ended, she lingered by the door, shuffling her papers. Suddenly, he was there beside her, his presence calm but commanding. "Miss Ella," he said, voice low and thoughtful. "Your perspective today was fascinating. You see the world differently." Then, with the faintest smile, he turned and walked away, leaving Ella standing there with her heart racing so wildly it almost hurt. Was this really happening? Was her dream, her secret hope of finding something extraordinary in Korea, already beginning to bloom? Ella's days settled into a quiet rhythm. Early morning walks to campus with a cup of sweet milk tea warming her hands, afternoons tucked inside bright lecture halls, and long evenings spent hunched over textbooks in the dorm's common room. Sometimes she'd watch groups of students hurry off to barbecues or laughter-filled coffee dates, and a small ache would pulse in her chest. Still, she reminded herself that she was living the very dream she had once prayed for under the hot Lagos sun. Dreams weren't always easy. They demanded sacrifice, loneliness, and courage. It was in the sunlit university library that Ella's world began to take on new, unexpected colors. She was crouched low between towering shelves, scanning titles when she sensed someone stop behind her. A quiet breath, the subtle shift of weight on polished floors. Slowly, she straightened and turned, nearly bumping into Professor Min Jae. He stood there, hands tucked neatly in his pockets, sleeves rolled up to his elbows in a way that made him look less like the intimidating lecturer she'd known, and more like a regular young man lost in thought. His expression barely changed. "Miss Ella, you study here often?" Ella fumbled with the stack of economics books in her arms. "I like the atmosphere. It helps me focus better than my dorm room." For a heartbeat, he simply regarded her. Then something like quiet approval flickered across his face. "That's a good habit. Surrounding yourself with knowledge makes even difficult subjects less overwhelming." Ella swallowed, surprised by the encouragement. "Thank you, Professor." Min Jae gave a small nod, purely professional, then stepped aside, his shoes making almost no sound as he disappeared down the aisle. Only when he was gone did she let out the breath she didn't know she'd been holding. A few days later, hushed whispers started threading through the lecture hall. A small knot of girls watched her too closely, their soft laughs edged with something sharp. "Of course he compliments her essays," one girl murmured after class, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "He always goes easier on foreign students." Ella kept her head down, even as the sting of those words followed her back to the dorm. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself she had imagined any special regard in Professor Min Jae's calm, unreadable eyes. Then the rain came. Seoul's skies opened up one afternoon, turning the university courtyard into a slick maze of puddles. Ella stood under a narrow awning, hugging her bag tight, debating whether to make a run for it. Suddenly, a black umbrella slid into place over her head. She startled, glancing up to find Min Jae beside her. Raindrops clung to his hair, darkening the shoulders of his crisp shirt. "You'll get sick if you wait too long," he said, matter of fact. His voice held no warmth or teasing, just a lecturer's mild concern for a diligent student. They walked across the courtyard in silence, the umbrella's rim brushing lightly against her shoulder. It felt strangely intimate, though she told herself it meant nothing. At the dorm steps, he paused and offered the umbrella to her. "Keep this, so you don't have an excuse to miss class because of a cold." Ella managed a small smile. "Thank you, Professor." With a simple nod, he turned and disappeared into the rain, leaving Ella standing on the steps with her heart racing for reasons she didn't fully understand. The umbrella rested by Ella's dorm door like a secret she hadn't asked for. She hadn't seen Professor Min Jae since that afternoon in the rain, and part of her wondered if he regretted it, if it had simply been a polite gesture from a kind man, not something she should read into. She reminded herself he was her lecturer. That was all. Still, things at school had started to shift. Not in obvious ways. No one said anything directly, but whispers trailed behind her like shadows. Some girls stared longer. Others ignored her altogether, even when she greeted them. And once, as she passed a group of students huddled in the corridor, someone let out a dry laugh and muttered just loud enough, "She really thinks she's the main character." Worse still were the moments Ella couldn't help witnessing. Small boxes of chocolates discreetly placed on Min Jae's desk, handwritten notes slipped under his door, girls giggling nervously as they lingered by the classroom long after lectures ended. He never seemed to indulge it. Ella once saw him hand back a tiny gift bag, bowing politely with the stiffest expression. "Please focus on your studies. That is where your energy is best spent." But somehow that only made him more fascinating to everyone and more unreachable. That was the day she met Nami. Ella was sitting alone in the campus cafe, a half-eaten kimbap on her tray and her economics notes spread out before her. She was trying to study, but her mind kept drifting. About Seoul, about belonging, about how easy it was to feel invisible in a city so alive. Suddenly, a cheerful voice broke her daze. "Are you always this serious, or is the textbook just that boring?" Ella blinked up. A girl with soft waves of brown hair, rosy cheeks, and a teasing smile stood beside her, holding a bright green iced matcha. "I've seen you in class. Ella, right? I'm Nami." Ella smiled politely. "Nice to meet you. Mind if I sit?" From that moment, Nami became an unexpected light in Ella's world. Over the following days, Nami insisted on dragging her to late-night convenience stores for ramen, sending her goofy voice notes, and sharing her wild theories about campus romances. She also noticed everything. One afternoon, they passed a couple girls whispering near a lecture hall door. Nami scoffed under her breath. More of them trying to get Professor Min-jae to notice them. I swear, half the reason they even take his class is to drool over him. Ella laughed, though her chest felt tight. He seems completely immune. That's what makes it worse for them, and that's why they glare at you so much. Because even if he's never smiled at them the way they want, they can't help noticing he actually listens when you speak. Ella flushed. You're imagining things. Nami slipped her arm through hers. Maybe, or maybe I'm the only one watching closely enough to see how much he's already paying attention. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Professor Min-jae paused during lecture and, without any expression change, said, Miss Ella, your analysis on the midterm, well done. It was one of the most thoughtful papers I've read this semester. The room went still. Eyes darted toward Ella. A few not-so-subtle gasps. Someone muttered something sharp under their breath. Ella froze. She could feel the walls closing in, not from the praise, but from what it would stir. She didn't look up, just nodded and whispered, Thank you. After class, she moved quickly, hoping to escape before anyone could speak to her. But as she stepped out into the hallway, she nearly collided with Min-jae. He looked at her for a beat, then said, low and simple, Don't dull your light because it makes others uncomfortable. Ella's breath caught, her voice suddenly small. Sometimes I wish I didn't stand out. Min-jae's jaw tightened, as if he hated hearing that. He gave her a quiet nod, then turned and walked away. That night, as Ella lay in bed, Nami sent her a simple message. I don't know what's going on with you and Professor Min-jae, but whatever it is, don't let fear be the thing that writes your story. Ella stared at the screen, heart thudding. She didn't know what this was. But whatever it was getting harder to pretend it wasn't there. It was as if the entire campus buzzed around Ella with secrets she wasn't meant to hear. By late October, the weather turned sharp, golden leaves skittering across the stone paths, and with it came a new, restless energy among her classmates. Small clusters of girls loitered outside Min-jae's office after lectures, holding little boxes from boutique bakeries or expensive bottled coffee. Their laughter was bright, almost forced, eyes darting each time his door swung open. Ella saw it all, how they would straighten their skirts, adjust their hair. Once she watched a girl with glossy bangs offer him a carefully wrapped gift. Min-jae took it into his hands only long enough to give it back. I appreciate the thought, but please, keep your focus on your studies. That's more valuable than anything else you could give me. His voice was gentle, but unmistakably final. The girl left with a brittle smile, her eyes shiny with embarrassment. Nami found the whole thing endlessly amusing. Over steaming cups of hot chocolate one evening, she leaned close, whispering conspiratorially. Honestly, it's kind of satisfying. They all bend over backward trying to catch his attention, but it's you he singles out in class. You he actually listens to. Ella groaned, hiding her face behind her hands. Nami, stop. It's humiliating. I don't want people thinking I'm trying to what? Excel? Be brilliant? Because that's all you've done, Nami interrupted, linking her arm through Ella's. You've been this way since your country, haven't you? I can see it in the way you answer questions. You don't just study to pass, you study to understand. Ella smiled despite herself, warmed by the rare sense of being fully seen. Then came the day the sky finally broke open. Classes had just ended when dark clouds unleashed a sudden downpour. Students squealed, dashing for doorways and overhangs. Ella stood by the lecture hall entrance, clutching her books to her chest, her breath coming out in small, uncertain puffs. Down the lane, Min-jae's sleek black sedan was parked under swaying trees, droplets racing down its polished surface. He could have easily driven off, escaping the weather with the quick ease of privilege. But he didn't. Instead, Ella watched, breath caught, as he stepped out into the rain with a single umbrella, striding purposefully toward her. When his eyes locked on hers, Ella's stomach twisted painfully. Without a word, he crossed the space between them and lifted the umbrella over her head, close enough she could feel the warmth of his arm brushing hers. You'll ruin your notes, he said, nodding at the folders hugged tight against her chest. His voice was low, rougher than usual, almost like he'd been holding something back for too long. Together, they moved through the rain in fragile silence, each careful step echoing between them louder than words. When they reached her dorm steps, Min-jae paused, his free hand half raised as if to touch her face, but thinking better of it. "Take it," he said finally, pressing the umbrella into her grip, "so you won't have excuses to skip class." Their eyes held for a long, delicate heartbeat. Ella's throat ached with things she didn't dare say. Then he turned and walked briskly back toward his waiting car, disappearing into the rain, leaving her standing there, with the umbrella trembling in her hand. Heart racing, skin warm from where he'd almost touched her, breathless with the terrifying hope that maybe he was starting to break his own careful rules, just for her. By November, Seoul's chill had teeth. Winds sliced through campus courtyards, sending scarves fluttering and students huddling close. Ella moved among them like a ghost, her thoughts tangled, her heart a quiet battlefield. Rumors had always lingered, thin and lazy, like smoke that never found flame. But now they burned. Someone snapped a photo of Min-jae holding the umbrella over Ella in the rain. It was blurry, but that almost made it worse. It left space for imaginations to run wild. By lunch the next day, the whispers were everywhere. "Did you hear? Professor Min-jae and that foreign girl? No wonder he praises her essays. She must be shameless trying to trap a lecturer like that." Ella tried to keep her head down, gripping her book so hard her knuckles ached, but nothing prepared her for when two girls passed her in the hallway, one snickering to the other. "Some people really think they can come here and steal everything, even our men." Nami found her by the library steps, hugging her knees to her chest. "They're awful," Nami breathed, fury sharpening her usually bright face. "You do realize they've all tried to catch his eye themselves, right? Gifts, fake questions after class, pathetic. And he's ignored every single one of them." Ella's throat felt tight. "That doesn't change how it looks. Maybe I should just keep more distance." Nami grabbed her shoulders. "And punish yourself because he notices your mind, because he sees you for who you are. Don't you dare shrink, Ella." But the universe seemed to be conspiring against them. 2 days later, Ella was crossing the quad when she spotted Min-jae standing by his sleek car, phone at his ear. Even from yards away, she could see the tension in his shoulders. When his eyes found hers, he ended the call abruptly. "Miss Ella," he called, his voice more formal than she'd heard in weeks. It stung, but she walked to him anyway. "There's talk going around campus," he said tightly, avoiding her eyes. "It's unfortunate. I want you to know if anyone crosses the line, truly crosses it, you must come to me immediately." Ella tried to laugh, but it broke in the middle. "So we pretend none of this is real? That it's just in their heads?" His jaw worked, something pained flickering across his face. Then suddenly, recklessly, he reached for her hand, gripping it so tightly she could feel the tremor in his own. "It's not just in their heads," he whispered. "I've tried to stay away. I've told myself every reason why this can't happen. But it's there, Ella, even if I wish it wasn't." Her heart soared and shattered all at once. Because while part of her thrilled to hear it, another part feared just how dangerous this was, for both of them. Min-jae seemed to sense it. With visible effort, he let go of her hand, stepping back as if burned. "Be careful," he said hoarsely. Then he turned and disappeared into his car, leaving Ella standing alone, hands still warm from where he'd held her, eyes stinging with tears she wasn't sure were from joy or heartbreak. Winter settled over Seoul like a hush, rooftops frosted in pale blue dawns. Ella found beauty in it, even when her heart felt tangled beyond saving. The rumors hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown sharper, students' curious eyes colder. She tried to avoid Min-jae, burying herself in studies, hoping the storm would pass. But life, she learned, had other plans. One late afternoon, Ella stayed behind in the lecture hall, carefully copying notes from the whiteboard. When she turned, startled by a sound, Min-jae was standing at the back, hands buried in his coat pockets, his eyes dark and unreadable. They just stared at each other, the room stretching silent around them. Then he spoke, voice low, almost raw. "Do you have any idea what it's been like? Watching you every day? Telling myself it was nothing?" Ella's breath caught. She shook her head helplessly. "Why me? There are so many who? Leave me notes on my desk? Buy me gifts hoping I'll notice?" He gave a faint, humorless laugh, stepping closer until she could see the fine tension in his jaw. "Ella, I noticed you the moment you walked into my classroom. Not because of how you look, though God knows that alone would be enough to undo most men, but because you were different." The way you scribbled down notes like they were treasures. The way your eyes lit up when you understood something no one else did. He paused, swallowing hard. It was love at first sight, though I tried every day to deny it. Maybe it was your mind, maybe it was your quiet stubbornness, or maybe it was simply you. I just knew from that very first moment that I wanted to be close, to know what made you smile, to protect that spark, even when it made no sense. Ella's tears spilled before she could stop them. Her chest felt split wide open, every ache and fear pouring out with them. Minjae reached out, cupping her face with trembling hands. I tried to stay away. I thought that was the right thing, for you, for my career, for everything. But all it did was hurt us both. Then don't stay away, she whispered. Her hands found his wrists, holding him there like she was afraid he'd vanish. Don't you see? I've been trying to fight it too, and it's exhausting. His laugh cracked, half joy, half agony. Then he kissed her, carefully at first, as though he couldn't quite believe it was real. When she leaned in, pressing closer, his arms wrapped around her so tightly it felt like he was trying to hold her entire world together. After that first trembling confession in the lecture hall, everything changed, and yet had to stay carefully hidden. Ella had been the one to whisper it first. Let's keep this just ours, at least for now. I couldn't stand to give them more reasons to hate me. Minjae agreed, pulling her into his arms with a smile that was almost sad. Then we'll be careful, as long as I still get to keep you. The next 6 months unfolded like a secret garden. Minjae would sometimes linger in his office, long after most professors had gone home, pretending to grade papers. Ella would slip in, her laughter hushed behind closed doors as he pulled her into a soft kiss. Once, he surprised her by drawing her into his lap mid-conversation, murmuring, "You talk too much when you're nervous," before pressing his lips to hers until her thoughts scattered. They met for late-night walks by the Han River, sharing warm cups of sweet milk tea. Na-Mi, ever the loyal conspirator, helped cover for them, smuggling Ella out of the dorm or warning her when campus gossip got too close. But secrecy only satisfied them for so long. One evening, Minjae stroked a strand of hair from Ella's face and sighed almost to himself. "You deserve more than stolen hours. I want to walk with you in daylight, hand in hand, where everyone can see." Ella's heart swelled with joy and fear all at once. "You know what they'll say. Let them," he whispered, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "Let them see what it means when something is real." And so he began to plan a future that wasn't shackled by campus walls. For years, Minjae had quietly managed shares in a thriving media consultancy, a side business that let him channel his sharp mind beyond lectures. Now, for the first time, he considered stepping fully into it. "For us," he told Ella one evening in his office, twirling her chair around so she landed chest to chest against him. "So your dreams here aren't ever overshadowed by who I am at the university." The day of his announcement arrived faster than either of them expected. Rumors had already been swirling about his sudden decision to resign, but it was the way he chose to reveal the truth that left the entire campus breathless. He found Ella on the courtyard steps, surrounded by curious stares. Without hesitation, he took her hand and pulled her close, then kissed her, slow and sure, right there in front of everyone. Gasps and stunned murmurs rose all around them. When he finally pulled back, Minjae's gaze swept across the shocked faces. "If you ever truly respected me," he said, voice calm but unyielding, "then you'll respect this too." A few girls sniffled dramatically, but then someone laughed and called out, half in mock jealousy, "Ella, you better take care of him, or we'll have to steal him from you after all." Ella burst into laughter, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't the cruelty she'd feared. Somehow, it was freeing. Later that evening, Ella curled up close beside Minjae on his small apartment sofa, the city outside a sweep of warm gold and soft traffic murmurs. She traced the edge of his shirt sleeve with trembling fingers. "I don't think I wanted to go back. Not yet. I think I've found my life here. A good friend, a good man. I'm not ready to let that go." Minjae went completely still. Then his face broke into the most breathtaking smile, a look of pure, stunned happiness that made her heart thump painfully. "That's all I've ever wanted to hear," he whispered. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "But you should tell your parents. They deserve to know, and you deserve to live this without shadows." Ella nodded, her heart racing with equal parts fear and bright, daring hope. Weeks later, Ella stood in her tiny apartment, laptop balanced on a stack of books, her parents' familiar faces glowing on the screen. Her heart raced, but this time it wasn't fear. It was the thrill of telling them the truth about who she was now. I wanted to tell you both. I've decided to stay in Korea, she said softly. Not just because of my studies, but because I've built a life here. I've found work I'm passionate about, friends who feel like family, a place that finally feels like my own. I want to see where it all leads. There was a long pause. Her father cleared his throat, looking away for a second as if blinking back emotion. Her mother's eyes glistened, but then her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. You've always chased your heart, Ella, her mother said at last, voice a little shaky. If this place makes you shine even brighter, then who are we to stand in your way? Ella let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, tears slipping free in relief and joy. They might have been thousands of miles apart, but in that moment her family felt impossibly close. She nearly ran to Min Jae's apartment that night, throwing her arms around his neck before he could even greet her. They're happy for me. They want me to stay, with you, with everything. His arms locked tight around her, his voice breaking. Then it's done. This is your home now, ours. She told Nami the next afternoon over caramel lattes, both of them squealing and hugging so hard the entire cafe turned to stare. Now you really can't leave me, Nami laughed, swiping tears from her eyes. And I get to brag forever that I was here from the very beginning. Spring returned to Seoul with a gentle hush, cherry blossoms spilling over streets and courtyards like soft confetti. But this spring was different. This spring, Ella stood beneath the blooms in a flowing graduation gown, the cap slightly crooked on her braids, clutching her diploma with hands that shook from more than just excitement. Min Jae was there from the very start of the ceremony, his camera slung around his neck, snapping photos like he was determined to capture every smile, every blink, every tiny proud tear that welled in Ella's eyes. When it was all over and students burst from the auditorium in clusters of laughter and selfies, Min Jae found her immediately, sweeping her into his arms so tightly she squealed in surprise. You did it, he breathed into her hair. His voice sounded rough, like he was fighting tears. I'm so damn proud of you. Then he pulled back just enough to cup her face and press a long, joy-filled kiss to her lips, right there in the middle of the crowd. Cheers and playful whistles rose all around them. Nami even shrieked dramatically, "Finally! Our favorite campus love story graduates too!" Ella broke into breathless laughter, resting her forehead against Min Jae's. It was like the entire courtyard glowed around them, classmates, professors, and even strangers beaming, clapping, teasing them with warm affection. It wasn't scandal anymore. It was simply love, out in the open, celebrated. Later, they strolled beneath the cherry blossoms hand in hand, Ella's diploma still tucked carefully under her arm, and somewhere deep inside, she marveled at how dreams didn't always come true in the ways she expected. Sometimes they bloomed larger, wilder, more breathtaking than any drama she could have ever written. She looked up at Min Jae, who was watching her with that same awestruck gaze he'd probably carried from the very start, and thought, this isn't just my story, it's ours. And it's only just beginning. If you enjoyed this story and want more swoon-worthy K-drama-inspired tales, don't forget to like, share, and hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and being part of this incredible journey.